Hey, davidtswood here, and welcome to my Extra Mile. And today's show, well, it's with me. It's another solo show. I'll talk about that in a second. First, I want to call out our comment winner, Nikel. Nikel, I think it's Regal or Regala. I apologize. She said, this was amazing and so beyond helpful and gave me the direction that I needed. And she was talking about Tracy O'Malley's show on how to talk to anyone. So if you haven't seen it, go watch it. Today's show, one of the things I always say, always shocks people, I love conflict. And the reason I say that is because on the other side of conflict, there's something stronger, more beautiful, a deeper connection, and more honesty, more truth, if it's handled beautifully and elegantly. And I want to share an acronym that I designed based on my success in resolving conflict. And so you're going to see that acronym, but I'm going to do it twice. Once for, big conflicts, huge ones. And once for the sort of the everyday small stuff. They're slightly different, sort of handling stuff with your kids or your husband or, dishes in the sink, that kind of thing where it just sort of bothers you. So there's two really beautiful acronyms that you can work with. Enjoy the show. Definitely see you on the other side. You know what to do. Beep, 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 beep. All right. Push like, get involved with the community and the conversation. And I'll definitely see you on the other side. So I want you to imagine if over these next 35, 40 minutes that you're able to learn a strategy that really allows you to master the art of conflict resolution. How many of you could get really excited about this next hour? And how many of you could get committed to making sure you have some space? Maybe if you don't have an hour right now, maybe just put this one on hold and commit to come back to it this evening or tomorrow morning or whatever, and really give yourself time. Because, if you're like 99.9% of the people on the planet, then you do have conflict going on with family members, people you love, in your family, with your children. It's kind of, it's always there. And the art of conflict resolution is something that really happened kind of naturally for me. And the reason I'm sharing this is because a friend of mine said to me one time, she said, you should teach on this, because she just heard me going through on a call, which lasted about 45 minutes, where I was sort of in the process of conflict resolution. And she said, oh my God, I can't believe listening to that you don't teach it. So this is where this has come about. So what if you really don't just take this on, but you practice and become a master of conflict resolution. So I'm going to go through some key strategies. One of my quotes that I wrote is this: the larger conflicts that we see consuming the world today are simply reflections of the smaller conflicts that consume us each day. So, whether it's a war or and think about a war, right? Where does that start? Well, it starts inside of somebody. And that somebody has a hate of another group of people or an individual, and that's how this thing starts to progress, right? So, if we look in the dictionary at the word conflict, it's a serious disagreement, argument, typically a protracted one, so conflict, or a dispute, a quarrel, a squabble, disagreement, clash, dissension, friction, strife, antagonism, dispute, feud. All right. So those are the way it's described. How I would like to describe conflict is simply something that naturally occurs when you live or hang out with other people. Right. And it just is so much easier to think of this as something that's just very, very natural. And another definition is when our wishes, or the human definition, when our wishes, desires, or needs don't get met or matched with the person that we are with, we typically go into conflict. All right? So when our wishes, desires, and needs don't get matched by the other person, we typically fall into conflict. Okay? Now, there is an easy solution if you don't want any conflict at all. Find a cave, go and live in that cave, and spend time there, with no other human interaction. And then, you'll probably get into conflict with yourself at some point, which, with that little voice in your head, why am I sitting in this cave? You're such an idiot, right? You don't understand how it goes, right? If you have a brain like everyone else. But conflict, if you look at the newspaper, especially today, again, as I'm recording this, it's crazy the amount of conflict and strife that's going on in the world, especially during these times. I'm recording this during COVID, all right? But there's three primary responses to conflict. The first, typical, is avoidance. Most people avoid it, and they say things, I'm fine, right? And of course, the big challenge with that is, and I had this happen with my brother. My brother and I didn't speak for 6 years. Now, this is years ago. I was quite young. In fact, I was probably 17 or 18 when it started. Years and years and years later, as I started to do more work and figure myself out and understand that, conflict is something that can be resolved and be resolved elegantly. I remember going, for years, we just didn't interact or speak. And when I started doing some work and I started to really want to have connections with my family, he couldn't even remember what the conflict was about. And that's how crazy it is. So this avoidance, can create the chasm between people, even if you can't really hold on to, there's something there, but you're not really clear about what it was in the beginning, what triggered it. And then there's two, highly emotional people that keep this thing getting further and further apart. So that's one way. The other way, emotional or physical aggression. A lot of people in conflict, go into the anger, that emotional response. And we see that a lot with kids because, if we understand about the human brain, the frontal cortex of the brain here is the last part of the brain to develop. So it develops when a kid is, 23, 24, 25. So you see a lot of kids, they're using a different part of the brain during those teenage years. And that's why you see a lot of kids, I hate you, Mom. I hate you, Dad. I wish you were dead. You see that kind of response because it's actually coming from the amygdala, which is much more of an emotional center. So you get that emotional trigger, boom. And a lot of these conflicts that happen when we're young, they carry on because, if you were like me as a teen, you may have said some wicked things or vicious things, and you kind of end up carrying that guilt sometimes, and that continues the conflict, right? Way into adulthood. And that's why so many adults, when I speak to them, talk about wearing a mask in front of their parents. Now, the third is obviously conflict resolution. Apology. Can we talk about this? Can we resolve it? And here's another one of my sayings that I wrote is hidden within the thorns of human conflict lies a seed of deeper and more authentic relationships. And the reason I say that is because I love conflict. I know it sounds crazy, but everyone I've had conflict with, without question, after it, once it's resolved elegantly, there is a deeper and a more authentic and a deeper understanding in a relationship, which is awesome, right? And a good thing to consider is our experience of the world and everyone in it is determined by our moment-to-moment feelings and interpretations. So everything, we're interpreting everything. We are story-making up machines, and we're going to make up a story about everything. And it's like, you walk into a room, and you see this with pretty women, very beautiful. 100 people can compliment her. She looks across the room, someone's scouring, and she can interpret that as they don't like me, I'm ugly, I look funny, whatever it is. If you're ladies listening, you know how your brain works in this situation. And maybe the other woman just had gas, right? She's like, ooh, right? But that's how we are. We're interpreting it, we're looking. And if we understand how the brain works, I'm not going to go into the whole brain psychology right now. So we experience the world not as it is. We experience the world as we are. And there's a famous story, it's the House of 1,000 Mirrors. And there's this special place, a house, there's 1,000 mirrors, and quite a way off, there's a little village. And there's a dog in this village that's heard about this House of 1,000 Mirrors. He's a really happy little dog, and he's excited. He so wants to go to the house of 1,000 mirrors. Anyway, finally one day he goes and he gets all the way to the house, and he climbs up the hill to the house of 1,000 mirrors, and he's excited, his tail's wagging, his tongue's out, he's panting, and as he walks up, suddenly he's greeted by 1,000 happy dogs with their tails wagging, and he's like, wow, and he's big smile on his face, and all 1,000 dogs smile back at him. And the dog is like, oh my God, it's exactly like I thought. He's like, this is the best place on earth. I can't wait to come back. And he goes trotting back. And he goes to the village, and he talks about his experience there. And there's another dog who lives in the village who's actually, really sad and grumpy a lot of the time and miserable and walks around kind of looking down and frowning. And so, he had the same thought about going to see this house of 1,000 mirrors. And he sort of climbs up the hill to the house of 1,000 mirrors, and he's got his shoulders hunched, and he's looking down, and he's looking sad. And as he walks up, and he suddenly sees 1,000 sad dogs, and it shocks him, and he becomes scared, so he growls, "Arr!" And 1,000 dogs growl back at him, and he really gets scared, and he turns and he runs, and he thinks, oh, this is the worst place on earth. He said, I can't ever go back there again, right? And that's really what it is. I mean, we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are, and the world treats us in accordance with that. So, however we show up, and it's intentional, it's deep inside. When I teach on the art of connection, I always say it starts with the intention. When I walk up to someone that I'm already thinking beautiful thoughts about them, I'm already intentional about the journey. I'm fascinated. I'm projecting great vibes into them, and people feel it. And that's why a lot of people will say to me after a short time, they're like, oh, I feel like I've known you forever, or I've never shared this story with anyone before. So, the house of 1,000 mirrors, how we are is what we reflect, and exactly what we get back. If we're grumpy, we get grumpy back. If we're distrusting, we get distrust back. If we're angry, we get anger back. If we're isolated, we push people away, and we become even more isolated. And there was a book I read which is called Leadership and Self-Deception. Now, it's called Getting Out of the Box. And it's by the Arbinger Institute. It's a great, great read, and it really it's an international bestseller. And what it talks about, and again, you have to sort of bear with me on this one, is that we all have a box, and imagine we carry this box everywhere, and it's a box that we can choose to be in or we can choose to be out. But imagine there's this box. When we're in our box, when we are closed in this box, this is from the book. So again, if you want to get greater clarity, read the book. But I'm going to give you the elevated version of this, and hopefully it's going to sort of trigger in your mind. In the box, we see everybody else as the problem, never ourselves, okay? We treat people more as objects, not people just like us, because we're closed in, we're projecting out, we're treating people like objects. For example, road rage, right? I mean, I always giggle when people get angry. I'm thinking, really? They're getting angry. They're getting angry on the road about someone pulling in, right? But imagine, you're driving along, and if you get road rage, or imagine there's a camper van, big old camper van, pulls in front of someone, and the guy's like, beep, 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 anger. In order to do that, we have to dehumanize the people. In fact, we don't really see the people, because the anger is just so in front. We just so enraged that we're in our box that we dehumanize that situation. We don't. If we're in anger, we don't sit there. This is what I attempt to do, is like, something happens and I wonder, maybe they were, distracted. Maybe it's just a little old couple. Maybe it's an old person who's, in their 90s or whatever. And I attempt to humanize, because the thing is, when we humanize, if we are thinking, like when that person cuts in front of us, Oh, there's a lovely old couple on holiday. They're probably having a great chat. Probably a little absent-minded, and he just pulled in. And you just sort of hold back and you're starting to think about the human element happening. Or, oh my God, I can't believe how often I've done that. How many times I've driven with one knee and, been distracted or, made a mistake or whatever, And so with all those things, if we're in the human element of that, and when that person pulls in, what would we do differently if we see them as real people with real emotions and and just being themselves? Then we wouldn't be like this, right? But in order to create this anger, we have to dehumanize the person that we're projecting to, right? So. What they say in the book, they say that we all started escaping into our box in early childhood, and we carry the box with us everywhere at all times. So in other words, we can be triggered quickly to go into the box, and this is why conflict is such an important subject to talk about. So when we're in our box, we treat people as objects. We remove ourselves from the imperfection of humanity. Now, this is really important. Again, this is really beautiful in the book. I remember actually having tears running down my face when I was reading this book. It's a very short book. You can read it in a day, right? So we treat people as objects. We remove ourselves from the imperfections of society. Now, no matter what we're doing on the outside, so some people, that's where the mask is. Yeah, everything's fine. No matter what we're doing on the outside, people respond primarily to how we're feeling about them on the inside. That's where this, you can walk past someone on the street and you don't know why you get the heebie-jeebies, but you do. Or you get this feeling of distrust. Or your nephew or niece says, I don't like Uncle Tim. He doesn't know why. He has this feeling, right? So because that's, there's something being projected that Uncle Tim may have the biggest smile on his face and say the right things, but that projection, what's happening on the inside, is what people pick up on. So again, and how we're feeling about them on the inside depends on whether we are inside or outside of our box, right? So when we're outside of our box, when we're open, when we're connected, when we're fascinated, when we're curious, right? We are projecting a different energy and we feel differently. When we are closed, when we are in conflict, when we are in constraint, imagine being in this box, right? Then what happens is, what we project, even though the smile may be on our face, internally we're locked in, right? We project something and we're going to get exactly back, the house of 1,000 mirrors, right? Okay, so in the box then, we see people as objects and it pushes them into their box. So someone can be really, really open, and I've seen this, I witness it all the time. Someone who's just having a great old time, someone walks up who's in their box, they're projecting this, this inhumane kind of a feeling, and someone immediately retreats. They retreat into their box without even knowing it. They become more guarded, closed, more defensive, more standoffish. These things happen in a millisecond, right? So people respond and reflect to how we see and treat them. So it's really important to say that. People respond to how we... And so when we're in our box, we tend to justify, we tend to blame, and we tend to complain, all right? So we can also be in our box about whole groups of people. We're seeing that a lot in the world today with regards to racism, bigotry, all these different things, homophobia, all these different things. So what happens is someone's in their box, right, about an entire group, whether it's an ethnic group, whether it's a choice group, but people can have a blanket feeling towards an entire group of people. And, I think of Adolf Hitler, for example, to think that he hated so much the Jewish people. So he had to be in his box. He had to be in that place where he completely dehumanized. And this is what they talk about in the book, right? And then when we look at, of course, Hitler's journey, we see that he had a very, very, very strict father. He was a very, very, very small man. He had ambitions to be an artist. People ridiculed him. And of course, this pushed him into a box where he lived. And he targeted his hate towards one specific group of people. So in a box, we see an object, puts them in the box. We resist them, and ultimately they resist us, right? As we resist, and resistance always equals pain, okay? And resistance always persists until we do something about it. Now, how we enter our box. I'm going to read these to you actually because I don't want to miss them. This again is when I betray myself by failing to do what I know that I should do for another person, I enter the box of self-deception. So when I betray myself by failing to do what I know that I should do for another person, I enter the box of self-deception. I start to justify myself, seeing myself as a victim, as hardworking, important, fair, generous, as a good husband, as a good father, etc. I start to see other people as lazy, inconsiderate, unappreciative, insensitive, unfair, etc. I inflate the other person's faults on my own virtues, justifying myself and blaming the other person. Again, they talk about this in the book. I hope you get there. But there's a hope and there's a way out, okay? But the right mindset is absolutely important when we're looking at conflict resolution. And we can't get out of the box by trying to change others. We can't, or doing the best to cope with others, the fake smile, or leaving, just running away from the situation. That is not going to help, right? Or even sometimes communicating, implementing new skills or techniques are not going to help. Changing your behavior is not going to help because they're all self-focused. You get out of the box by focusing your attention on others, right? So out of the box, we see a person's with their hopes, their desires, their fears, and their gifts, and it elevates them out of their own box. People respond and reflect how we see and treat them. And out of the box, we begin to take personal responsibility, okay? We no longer resist and move consciously towards others, all right? We no longer justify or blame, complain. Instead, we want to help. And remember, one of my other sayings is everyone's waiting for somebody else to go first. So what I want to do is I want to share with you a conflict resolution of more serious conflicts. And then maybe later on I'll do a second one that really looks at some of the day-to-day sort of conflicts, because it's slightly different strategies. But if you can handle the big ones, because most of you have a big one, maybe it's a family member, remember again, when you're in conflict with a person, you are definitely in your box, because and you're definitely dehumanizing them at some point. Or you're waiting for them to go first. And remember, everyone's waiting for somebody else to go first. Excuse me. Don't put eyes. Never put ice in a drink when you're doing a video training, because then you have to crunch it. Okay, so leaders is an acronym, and leaders resolve all conflict. All right, so remember, the first is the L. And the idea here is to lead with intention. Lead with intention. All right, and I love the Steve Covey quote, begin with the end in mind. Okay, and so, I'll give you the example of this. When I have conflict, and I've recently had a conflict with a person, and typically, some of these conflicts that occur from a misunderstanding, or from, someone is upset about something they think you've done, and maybe they project. This particular person was very, very upset, and I heard about it, I reached out to them, and I led with intention, and it sounded something like this. Hey, I just wanted to call. My intention of this call is to really gain greater clarity. I do respect this person highly, so I'm not just saying this. I respect you. I hope that we can, find a way to a greater understanding, greater communication, and a greater friendship. So my intention is leading with conflict. I lead with what's the outcome I want. So if you're in conflict with your parents or your brother or your sister or someone else, right? The question is, what is it you really want? Because if you're just hurt right now, if you want to elevate yourself, get out of your box, right? Elevate yourself, see their human side, and understand that we all make mistakes. Understand, regardless of what it is, we all make mistakes. We do and say things that if we could, or if we understood how they land, we'd go back and fix them, right? So leading with intention is always that. So whenever I'm in conflict, the first thing I do is lead with my intention. My intention is for us to become, even if let's say I don't want to be friends with them, but I say, my intention is just to really help us both understand what's really happening so that we can both learn from this. And I think it's going to help us both become, greater parents or greater friends. And I just really appreciate the opportunity. So whatever that is, but I'm always leading with what's the outcome I want. Not, hey, my intention is that you freaking understand what I'm talking about, right? That is not the intention. So if you're in that place still, if you're still angry, then you're not ready for conflict resolution. Conflict resolution is when we're elevating ourselves above the conflict because we've been there before. You've all been there. And if you really want to master conflict resolution, then the intentional part is, well, what do I really want? I want to have a greater sense of control. I want to feel empowered, not like I'm a pinball ball in a pinball game going around, right? So lead with intention. E. So the EL is lead with intention. E is explore timing. Because, when I phone this guy, I want to say, first I've told the intention, is this a good time? Now, if they're really angry with me, or if they're really pissed off, or they can't see straight yet, they're just frustrated, or they may be busy, then the question is, is this a good time? No, it's not. Actually, no, I'm really busy today. Great. Is there a time I can call you back? Now, this one person I was in conflict with, it took 9 years. So I held the intention. I always held the intention, but he wasn't ready for 9 years. But I remember the moment he succumbed, because you're going to see with the S of leaders the power of this particular acronym that I created. Again, this is something I've created. But 9 years later, but often it could be months, it could be it could be 6 months, it could be a year, it could be however long it takes. But is this a good time? Yes, no. Yes, it is. All right. So now the right thing said at the wrong time is still the wrong thing. So the right thing said at the wrong time is still the wrong thing. So L, lead with intention. E, explore timing. A, ask them to go first. And this is really, really important, right? Because, there's something very powerful about listening. And there's something really powerful about actively listening, all right? I know the Dalai Lama said this. He said, it is under the greatest adversity that there exists the greatest potential for doing good, both for oneself and others. So it's in the greatest adversity that we can do the greatest good for ourselves and others. And conflict is like that, right? So, so we want to actively listen. And I love the idea of active listening is when you actively listen, your opinion can be changed by the other person because you're listening to them actively, not waiting to jump in. Well, let me tell you what I was thinking. So, because that's what the D's about, by the way. D is don't interrupt. So L, lead with intention. E, explore timing. A, ask them to go first. D, don't interrupt. So active listening is being able to be changed by the other person. Imagine that. And that's exactly what happened with this one guy. I was I wasn't in conflict, to be quite frank, but he was definitely pissed off with me, and he thought I was condoning something that I wasn't, but I hadn't heard his side of the story. And I had no real kind of bias either way to what was upsetting him. But after I heard his opinion, I was really like, wow, I'd never thought of that, and thank you. Now I really hear. And you know what happens when someone's in conflict and they feel heard? It's like, it actually dissipates the conflict, right? So the E, so L, lead with intention. E, explore timing. A, ask them to go first. D, don't interrupt. E, explain your side of the story. Would it be okay if I share my side of the story? Okay, you've listened to them, and this one person, 45 minutes explaining his side of the story. And I just kept saying, it's that Steve Covey principle again, seek to understand, then be understood. And so I'm like, so if I get you right then, this is what you were feeling. No, it's not what I was feeling. What I was feeling was this. Oh, I got you. So if I got you right, then you were feeling this. Yes. Great. So that kind of really listening, right? But when you get to your explaining of your side of the story, don't expect anything to change or the person to agree with your side of the story. And I learned that years and years and years ago. I had conflict with my family, and this woman suggested that I go home and sort it out because I've been carrying this stuff for years, and holding on to dark energies, anger, hatred, is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die, right? So I went home, and thank goodness she said this. She said, when you talk to your family, excuse me, she said, understand that they may disagree that it happened. They may say it never happened. They may not change. They may not apologize. Understand that. And thank goodness she told me that, because all of those things occurred. But because my intention was to resolve conflict for myself, is to remove the energy from my body and to start to live my life outside of my box, right? Then I was able to understand that that was one of the outcomes to expect, that nothing was going to change on their side. But I still wanted to live in a world without conflict, right? I'm not arguing. I'm merely explaining why I'm right. None of that, okay? So R, so L, lead with intention. E, explore timing. A, ask them to go first. D, don't interrupt. E, explain your side of the story. R, resist the urge to gossip. Whoever gossips to you will ultimately gossip about you. And, this happened, and one of the big practices, when I ended a relationship, and especially one that was significant, and, people want to pick sides, or people share what's going on because they want people to choose their side, or they want to understand why their relationship ended. And one of the things I learned many years ago was to resist that. And even though it's hard at the moment, because you kind of want to share your side of the story, especially if the other person is sharing theirs, but when you resist the urge to gossip, all right, and you set the intention. So this is a great example, with the mother of my children, Pam. I would consider us to be best friends. But there was this, after our marriage ended, there was definitely feelings where I felt like I wanted to talk to people and share, why I thought it, but I never did. And I really resisted that. And it taught me a lot of lessons, and especially in conflict resolution, when you're in that conflict, if you're going around and whispering to other people, intentionally, remember what we talked about, it's what you're feeling inside. So if your intention's not clean, and a clean intention means that you're not gossiping because you're resolving. You don't have space. You can't be resolving and gossiping. You can't be saying, oh my God, this guy's such a dick. Well, I can't believe she does. Oh, blah, 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 right? The intention is when they see you, they see the cleanness is projecting out all the time, and they can feel it. They feel something different. So resist the urge to gossip, okay? And then S. I told you S is going to be important. Stay true to your intentions and stay on the high ground. So L, lead with intention. E, explore timing. A, ask them to go first. D, don't interrupt. E, explain your side of the story. R, resist the urge to gossip. Don't talk to anyone about this. Now, if you wanted help, by the way, if you said, look, is there any way I can chat with you? I have some conflict. Now, you don't have to use the person's name. You can say, I have some conflict with someone and I'm really looking for some guidance. Or, how would you deal with this? That's different from gossip. That's a solution-based conversation where you're looking for a solution. You're not talking about someone. And I always say, if you learn this lesson, this is a great lesson, always talk about people as if they're standing next to you. What would you say if the person was standing next to you? Only speak about people as if they're there. And one of the things you'll hear me say a lot, one of my caveats is, I've already spoken. If I start talking about someone, I'll say, I've already shared this with them, by the way. Or one day, recently I caught myself talking about it. I said, whoa, I got to stop this conversation. Sorry, I haven't talked to the person yet, but I'm going to. After I've talked to them, I'll talk to you about it, right? Because that was that thing. But S, stay on the high ground. This is where, going back to the gentleman where I said it was 9 years, right, is every time I saw this person, I just thought of my intentions. And I projected what I was really feeling, which was, my intention is to resolve this conflict. And And that particular conflict was a hard one because he was very vocal in front of a group of people, which was quite embarrassing. But I just, again, if I want to live in a world where, I have ultimate power, then I can't be sucked into just some behavioral things, even if it takes 9 years. And again, when that person came up and hugged me and thanked me for how I'd been all these years and the contribution, right? But I'd stayed on that high ground. Never once in 9 years did I talk to anybody or mention a name of him to anybody, because once you do, that little gossip, those words are going to pass around fast. And then you lose integrity, because when you're talking, if you want to resolve conflict and you're also into the gossip mode and your words come back to that person, they'll never trust you. So whatever you say has no credence unless you live in a world where your word is law in your universe. When you say something, you keep your word, right? And it's hard. And if you break it, I caught myself doing that. I actually had to call someone the other day. I said, I got to be honest, I never talk behind someone's back. And I was starting to talk about you behind your back, and I realized I hadn't told you this. Can I share something with you? And I just shared it with him, because that way I get clean again. Because you stop that sort of energy that's constantly in flux. Again, putting people in their box and keeping you in your box. Nelson Mandela said this. He said, "What counts in life is not the mere fact that we've lived. It is what difference we've made in the lives of others that will determine the significance of the life that we ultimately lead." So one more recap. L, lead with intention. E, inquire about timing. A, ask them to go first. D, don't interrupt. E, explain your side of the story. R, resist the urge to gossip. And S, stay on the high ground, right? So remember this again. Before you're a leader, success is always about growing yourself. When you become a leader, success is all about growing others. That's from Jack Welch. So, with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this. Get the book. Enjoy the book. It's a great book. It's a great read. There is sort of another sort of acronym for daily occurrences. So the L would be find the legitimate source. Because if you're in an office or in a house, who's the legitimate source of the conflict, especially if it's something simple like leaving the dishes in the sink, right? Leaving a mess in the living room. So often it's easy to project out to the wrong person. So who's the source of that conflict? Again, remember, it's not always clear. That's the L. E is the same. Explore timing. All right. So legitimate source. Explore timing. All right. Approach with sincere appreciation if it's a daily thing. So when you approach a family member, especially, and if you're constantly nagging, then look at teenagers. They're always in their box because normally mom or dad is constantly writing them about everything being wrong. Hey, you do your homework. You do this. You left a mess in the kitchen. Why are your socks in the bedroom? So when we start to build it, it's like, let's say your son mowed the lawn and maybe he didn't do the best job or didn't put the lawnmower away. That idea is like, hey, listen, first of all, thank you. Thank you for thank you for mowing the lawn. I really, really, really appreciate you. Thank you for taking care of this. It looks awesome. Thank you. Right? So there's that, there's that appreciation part that's necessary to get them to open the box. Because if you're constantly writing them and they feel it's never good enough, then they're going to stay in that box. The other thing that parents do a lot and couples, is they deal with one thing at a time. So if it's a mess in the kitchen, right? Don't talk about, and then what about your bedroom? And look at the shit in your car and all those kinds of things, right? So sort of resist lumping everything together. Just deal with one conflict at a time, right? And then emphasize the exact emotions. This is the E. It's slightly different. Emphasize your emotions. So what's going on? I'm angry. I'm jealous. I'm sad. I feel unappreciated. I'm frustrated. Oh my God. Would it be okay if I share? I'm just so frustrated because, I'm at work for 8 hours and I come home and it's such a mess. And for me, it's just like, I just love to relax and it's just to have a clean kitchen so I can come in and make a cup of tea, right? So you're going to share the exact emotion and then resolve that particular need. So remember, you haven't lumped them together. You know what emotion is going on, and resolve the particular need that you want, right? So remember the human definition I gave earlier, right? When our wishes, desires, or needs don't get met or matched with someone else, we go into conflict. So what's the thing do you need? Do you need help? Do you need space? Do you need us time? A vacation, me time? Or do you need support? So that's what you're going to ask, would it be okay? Can you just help me a little bit? Would it be okay if you could just do this one thing just before I get home so that I don't feel so frustrated or overwhelmed? So you're going to deal with that and then negotiate. You can negotiate backwards and forwards, right? Give and take. It's all about give and take. And then the S on leaders is start over when necessary. Because with families, it's constantly, it's like, you have this thing and they do it for a few weeks and suddenly it starts to slide. And then start over and say, hey, listen. So you're going to go back to the L, the E, the A, the D, right? And go through those again. Now remember, conflict cannot survive without your participation. Conflict cannot survive without your participation. So with the daily conflict, I said I was going to do it on another one, but I'm doing it now. Find the legitimate source, explore the timing, right? Approach with a sincere appreciation, only deal with one behavior at a time, emphasize the exact emotion, resolve the need, start over when necessary. Leaders, legitimate sword, L. Explore timing, E. A, approach with sincere appreciation. D, deal with one behavior at a time. E, emphasize the exact emotion. R, resolve the need. And S, start over when necessary. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this. Don't forget to join me on my social media. David T.S. Wood on Instagram, David T.S. Wood on Facebook. And of course, I've started to tweet. I'm still haven't learned that whole thing. I don't know exactly how to use it, but David T.S. Wood again. I have a YouTube channel, My Extra Mile, which you're on right now. So please don't forget to subscribe, push like because it really helps. And if you can, get involved with the conversation. That'd be awesome. As we're building YouTube as a slow build, we're doing it quite quickly. But I also want to know, what do you want to hear about? What would you like? Where would you like me to go for you? How long do you want these trainings to be or these recordings to be? Understand that I can bend, twist, and shape this to suit your life. So please comment. Let me know where you want me to go. Let me know how you want to absorb this. Help us get better. And remember, conflict, fall in love with it, and stay outside your box. Know when you're going in and watch the world around you, House of a Thousand Mirrors, and know when you come out, watch the world around you and say, which world do I want to live in? In the box, you got it with you all the time. You can jump in quickly. So the other thing, before I go, one of the things I do is give people the benefit of the doubt. So when they mess up, I don't take offense, or I try not to, and I make up a story that works better to keep me out the box. Oh, that guy was so rude to me, right? That's one way of thinking it. I think, oh my God, that guy was in such a hurry. Well, that guy must be really frustrated right now. Oh my God, that guy, I bet there's something going on at home right now. I wonder what it is. I wonder how he's doing, right? For him to be that angry or that rude that fast, there's got to be something else going on. So that idea is, instead of me going, oh, what an asshole, right? In the box, and then projecting out my anger, I can stay out the box, be curious, and then move back into conflict. Now, there is this other part which has happened where I was in a bar, maybe 2 years ago now. I don't have many of these situations, but there's a guy who's, I'm 6'3". You can't tell when I'm sitting down, but this guy was at least 6'5", and he was, I'm like 210 pounds. He's 240 or something like that. But he was treating his wife like crap. And I walked up to him and I put my face in his grill. Now, I'm not a fighter, but there's another form of conflict. It's not putting up with shit, right? And I wasn't in conflict. I didn't get angry, but I wanted to defend this woman the way he was treating her. And I walked up and I was intentional not to be angry. And I soft voice. I was hostile in my approach. And what happened next was astounding, because I wasn't about to fight, but I was dealing with a different type of conflict where I was willing, again, as a non-fighter, he could have crucified me, I don't know, but I wasn't willing to sit back and watch this woman be hurt by him. And so as I got into his grill, the bouncers came running, grabbed him and threw him out the bar. They didn't even talk to me. So there was something about my energy and my intention that wasn't about me being aggressive and fighting. There was something about me protecting someone, because she couldn't protect herself. So again, it's not like I walk through life where I don't get into that immediate conflict sometimes, which isn't one I'm going to resolve necessarily. I could have gone outside and talked to the guy, which could have led to a fight. I don't know. But just anyway, enjoy it. We'll see you on the other side. Thank you. Thank you for sitting through this. And please share it with your friends. Ciao.